He wasn't supposed to make it out. A Marine, shattered by war, betrayed by the one vow that promised forever. His wife buried him alive in a forgotten cemetery, disappeared into Montana's fog-choked darkness, leaving only the sound of dirt hitting flesh. And yet he survived. Not because of chance. Because of a dog. A German shepherd scarred by the same battlefields, a ghost who refused to let his brother die alone. They say love speaks without words, but this one clawed through 6 feet of earth, barked through the silence of abandonment, and ran straight into the jaws of evil to pull truth back into the light. This isn't just about survival. It's about the kind of loyalty only heaven could design. The kind that looks at a grave and says, "Not today. Not him." Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And if you believe a dog's devotion is proof that God still sends angels with 4 legs, hit subscribe and drop an amen in the comments. Because what you're about to witness will remind you why some bonds can't be buried. The evening air around the old Riverside Cemetery outside Helena, Montana hung heavy and cold, thick with the scent of wet grass and decaying leaves. Fog rolled through the wrought iron gates like something alive, curling around weathered headstones and forgotten monuments. The sun had already dipped below the ridge, leaving behind only a bruised twilight that bled purple and gray across the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called once, then fell silent. This place had no business being visited after dark. But that, Elena Butler knew, was precisely the point. Henderson Butler sat rigid in his wheelchair, his broad shoulders draped in a faded Marine Corps jacket that had seen better days. At 35, his face was a roadmap of violence survived. A deep scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a souvenir from the IED that had stolen his ability to walk and left phantom fire burning through his spine. His dark eyes, though weary, still carried the alertness of a man trained never to relax. His hands, calloused and strong despite years of disuse below the waist, gripped the armrests of his chair as Elena pushed him along the cracked cemetery path. Elena Butler moved behind him with the fluid grace of a dancer, her slim figure clothed in dark jeans and a designer black coat that whispered money with every step. Her face, pale and angular, might have been beautiful if not for the hardness in her eyes that never quite smiled even when her mouth did. She had been a pharmaceutical sales rep when they met at a VA hospital benefit 3 years ago. The courtship had been brief, the marriage quicker, and the affection, that had evaporated like morning dew the moment Henderson's grandfather's estate transferred into joint ownership. "You said you wanted to pay respects to your platoon," Henderson said, his voice rough with doubt. "But I don't remember any of them being buried here." "It's symbolic, Henderson," Elena replied smoothly, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "You always talk about honoring the fallen. I thought this would bring you peace." Henderson's jaw tightened. Something felt wrong. The isolation. The timing. The way she'd insisted on coming tonight, refusing to wait until morning. Behind them, back at the estate nearly a mile down the dirt road, Ghost was locked in the garage, Elena's doing. She'd claimed the ground was too uneven for a dog to navigate safely. But Ghost had navigated worse. He'd navigated Fallujah. The path narrowed as they moved deeper into the cemetery. Monuments gave way to unmarked plots overgrown with thistle and wild grass. And then Elena stopped. Directly ahead, barely visible in the dying light, was a rectangular hole in the earth. Freshly dug. the soil piled beside it in a dark, waiting mound. Henderson's blood went cold. "What is that?" Elena stepped around to face him, and for the first time that evening she smiled. But it was the kind of smile that had no warmth in it, no humanity, just cold, patient satisfaction. "Your peace, Henderson," she said quietly. "Finally. If this story has gripped you, imagine what's coming next. We pour our hearts into bringing you stories of courage, betrayal, and the unbreakable bonds that define us, and we can only keep doing it with your support. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Because this channel, it's built by people who believe some stories are too powerful to scroll past. Join us. Be part of something real. And stay until the end, because what Ghost does next will leave you speechless. It had started 3 hours earlier, just as dusk began swallowing the Montana sky. Henderson had been in the study, reviewing paperwork for the veteran support group he'd been trying to launch, when Elena appeared in the doorway with that practiced softness in her voice. The one she used when she wanted something. "I've been thinking," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You always talk about honoring your brothers, the ones who didn't make it back." Henderson looked up, surprised. Elena rarely engaged with his military past. She'd made it clear early in their marriage that she preferred to focus on the future, not the ghosts he carried. "I do," he said cautiously. "There's a cemetery. Riverside. It's quiet, private. I thought maybe tonight we could go. Light a candle. Say a few words." She stepped closer, and for a moment, Henderson saw something almost tender in her expression. "You carry so much, Henderson. Maybe it's time to let some of it go." He wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe that the woman he'd married still existed beneath the cold stranger she'd become. The woman who'd once traced the scars on his face and called them beautiful. The woman who'd promised that his wheelchair didn't define him. That woman had disappeared sometime after the estate paperwork cleared, replaced by this hollow-eyed stranger who spoke to him like he was an obligation. But here she was, offering something that resembled care. So he agreed. Ghost had begun whining the moment Elena wheeled Henderson toward the garage. The shepherd paced in tight circles, his ears flat against his skull, a low rumble building in his chest. "He can't come," Elena said firmly, her voice taking on that sharp edge Henderson had grown accustomed to. "The ground's too rough out there. He'll hurt himself in the dark." Before Henderson could protest, she'd closed the garage door, cutting off Ghost's desperate barking. The drive had been silent except for the hum of tires on gravel and the occasional ping of stones against the undercarriage. Elena's hands were steady on the wheel, her face illuminated in intervals by passing streetlights. She looked almost serene, like someone going to church rather than a cemetery. Henderson stared out the window at the blur of pines, trying to shake the knot tightening in his chest. His therapist had called it hypervigilance, a combat reflex that never quite turned off. But this felt different. This felt like the moment before an ambush. When they finally pulled up to the rusted cemetery gates, the fog had already settled like a burial shroud over the grounds, thick enough to taste. Elena killed the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. She came around to lower the wheelchair ramp, her movements efficient and rehearsed. Too rehearsed. "Ready?" she asked, and her smile was all wrong. Henderson's wheels crunched over gravel and dead grass as Elena pushed him deeper into the cemetery. The fog swallowed monuments and headstones until they were nothing but gray shapes in the murk. His breath came in visible clouds, each exhale a small ghost dissipating into the cold. They moved past the older graves, the ones with weathered angels and faded names, into a section where the ground grew wild and untended. And then Elena stopped. "Here," she said simply. Henderson looked around, confused. There were no markers here. No plaques. No flags. Just overgrown grass and the skeletal remains of a wrought iron fence half swallowed by earth. And directly in front of him, barely visible in the fading light, a rectangular hole gaped in the ground. Fresh dirt piled beside it in a dark mound. "Elena, what is?" The words died in his throat as she stepped around to face him. Her expression had changed. The practiced tenderness was gone, stripped away like a mask removed. What remained was cold, clinical, the look of someone solving a problem. "I need you to understand something," she said, her voice eerily calm. "This isn't personal, Henderson. It's just that you've become inconvenient. The insurance alone is worth $3 million. The estate, another $6 million. Your military benefits, the disability checks, the survivor pensions." She tilted her head, almost curious. "Did you really think I could spend the rest of my life pushing a wheelchair?" Henderson's heart hammered against his ribs. "Elena, whatever this is." "Goodbye, Henderson." She moved behind him with surprising speed, and before he could react, she kicked the wheelchair lock release. Her hands shoved hard against his shoulders. The chair tipped forward. Henderson's stomach lurched as gravity took him, and then he was falling, tumbling forward into the darkness. He hit the bottom hard, his shoulder slamming into cold earth, the wheelchair crashing down beside him. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and disorienting. Above him, Elena's silhouette appeared at the edge of the grave, backlit by the dying light. She reached for something beyond his line of sight. A shovel. The blade bit into the dirt pile with a metallic scrape, and then the first load of earth came raining down. It hit his chest, his face, filling his mouth with the taste of clay and death. He spit, gasping, trying to push himself up with arms that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. "Elena, please." Another shovelful. This one heavier. It covered his legs, his torso. He clawed at the dirt, but his paralyzed body betrayed him. He couldn't stand, couldn't run, couldn't do anything but lie there and watch her work. And she smiled as she did it, a smile that chilled bone. Back at the estate, Ghost hadn't stopped fighting since the garage door closed. The old leather lead Elena had used to tie him to the workbench groaned under the strain as the shepherd threw his weight against it again and again. His paws scrambled against concrete, claws scraping, chest heaving with each desperate lunge. He could smell it. Fear. Henderson's fear, somehow carried on the wind that seeped through the gap beneath the door. Something was wrong. Everything was wrong. Ghost's amber eyes fixed on the leather strap with singular focus. He'd survived Kandahar. He'd dragged wounded soldiers from burning vehicles. He'd detected IEDs that would have killed entire convoys. He was not going to be stopped by a strip of cowhide. He backed up, lowered his head, and charged. The lead snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The shepherd hit the garage door at full speed, but it didn't budge. He circled back, panting, scanning. There. A window. Small. 8 feet up. But Ghost wasn't thinking about limitations. He leapt onto the hood of the truck, scrambled up to the roof, and launched himself at the window. Glass shattered. He squeezed through the jagged opening, feeling shards tear at his fur, his skin. Blood matted his coat, but pain was irrelevant. Henderson needed him. His paws hit grass, and he ran. Not toward the road where the van had disappeared, but through the forest. Instinct guided him, the same way it had guided him through minefields and urban mazes. He knew where Henderson was. He'd always known. The scent trail was faint but present, ghost-thin threads of fear and sweat carried on the evening air. Ghost ran like death itself was chasing him, tearing through undergrowth, leaping fallen logs, his breath coming in ragged bursts. The cemetery emerged from the fog like a wound in the earth. Ghost slowed, ears forward, every muscle coiled. He could hear it now. The rhythmic scrape of metal on dirt. The sound of someone digging. And beneath it, fainter, the labored breathing of a man struggling to stay alive. Ghost's lips peeled back from his teeth. He moved through the gravestones like a shadow, silent despite his size. Elena had her back to him, focused entirely on the hole before her, on the burial she was so methodically completing. She raised the shovel for another load, and that's when Ghost struck. He launched himself at her with a snarl that came from somewhere primal, somewhere that remembered wolves and war. His jaws found her arm. She screamed, spinning, the shovel clattering away. Ghost didn't let go. He shook his head violently, the way his ancestors had shaken prey, and Elena went down hard. Elena's scream cut through the fog like a siren. She kicked frantically, her free hand clawing at Ghost's muzzle, trying to pry those jaws loose. But the shepherd's bite was iron, fueled by something deeper than training. This was the same dog who'd refused to leave wounded Marines on foreign soil. He wasn't about to abandon Henderson now. Blood soaked through Elena's sleeve, warm and dark. She managed to twist her body, reaching for something in her jacket pocket. A canister. Pepper spray. The mist hit Ghost square in the eyes and nose. He yelped, releasing her, stumbling backward with his head shaking violently. Elena scrambled to her feet, clutching her mangled arm, her face twisted in pain and fury. "You stupid animal," she hissed. She looked toward the grave, toward Henderson's hand still visible above the dirt, clawing at air. For a moment their eyes met. Then she ran, disappearing into the fog like smoke, her footsteps fading into nothing. In the grave, Henderson was drowning in earth. The soil had risen past his chest, creeping up his neck. Each breath was harder than the last, his lungs burning as he fought to keep his mouth and nose clear. His arms, still functional, still strong from years of wheelchair use, pushed against the weight, creating tiny pockets of air. But he was losing. The dirt was too heavy, too relentless. His vision began to blur at the edges. He thought of his platoon, of the brothers he'd lost. Was this it? Surviving Fallujah only to die in a hole dug by his own wife? Then he heard it. Panting. Frantic digging. The sound of claws tearing through earth with desperate speed. Ghost. Henderson's voice was barely a whisper, choked with dirt and hope. The shepherd appeared at the edge of the grave, his eyes still streaming from the pepper spray, blood matting his fur from the broken window. But he didn't hesitate. He jumped down into the pit and began digging with both front paws, throwing dirt behind him in wild arcs. His whimpers mixed with Henderson's labored breathing as they both fought against time. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, imagine being the person this actually happened to. These aren't just stories. They're testaments to the unbreakable bonds that define us. We bring you these powerful true accounts because we believe they deserve to be told, but we can only continue with your support. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of courage, loyalty, and redemption. This channel survives because of viewers like you who believe some stories need to be heard. Join our community. Be part of something real. Ghost dug until his paws bled. He dug until Henderson could move his arms freely, until he could push the wheelchair aside, until he could breathe without tasting death. The shepherd's muzzle found Henderson's face, licking away dirt and tears, whimpering with relief. Henderson wrapped his arms around Ghost's neck, holding on like the dog was the only real thing left in the world. Because right then, he was. Sam Reeves had been making his final patrol of Riverside Cemetery when he heard it. A bark. Not the casual sound of a dog chasing rabbits, but something urgent, desperate, sharp enough to cut through the evening fog. He'd been a park ranger in Helena for 12 years, and before that, a Marine Corps sergeant. He knew the difference between noise and a distress call. This was the latter. Sam killed the engine of his truck and stepped out into the cold, his flashlight cutting a pale beam through the darkness. "Hello." His voice echoed off headstones. The barking came again, frantic now, coming from somewhere deep in the overgrown section where nobody visited anymore, where nobody should be at this hour. He moved quickly, his boots crunching over gravel, hand instinctively moving to the radio clipped to his belt. Then he saw the dog, a German shepherd, bloodied and limping, standing at the edge of what looked like a fresh grave. The animal's eyes locked onto Sam's, and for a moment something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or just the raw plea of one soul to another. Help him. The dog barked again, then disappeared into the pit. Sam ran. His flashlight beam bounced wildly as he closed the distance, and when he finally looked down into that hole, his blood turned to ice. A man lay half buried in dirt, his wheelchair twisted beside him, the dog frantically digging at the soil covering his legs. The man's face was caked with earth, his eyes closed, his chest barely moving. But he was alive. Barely. Jesus Christ. Sam dropped to his knees and keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Reeves. I need emergency medical at Riverside Cemetery, East Section. I've got a male victim, looks like attempted homicide. Get me paramedics and sheriff's deputies now." He didn't wait for confirmation. Sam jumped into the grave, landing beside the dog who seemed to understand they were now working together. "Easy, boy. I've got him." Sam's hands moved quickly, clearing dirt from a man's torso, his neck, checking for a pulse. Weak but there. The man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, confused. "Henderson." Sam whispered, recognition hitting him like a fist. Henderson Butler. They'd served in the same battalion. Different platoons, but close enough that Sam remembered him from the VA meetings. Remembered the day Henderson came home without his legs. And now this. "Who did this to you, brother?" Henderson's lips moved. forming a single word that came out like a dying breath. Wife. Maria Gonzalez had worked as the Butler estate housekeeper for 6 years, long before Elena had entered the picture. She'd watched Henderson grow from a broken young man fresh from Walter Reed into someone who'd found a fragile kind of peace in the Montana mountains. And she'd watched that peace erode the moment Elena Butler signed her name on the marriage certificate. Maria had never trusted the woman. Too polished. Too calculating. The kind of person who smiled with her mouth but never her eyes. The morning after Henderson disappeared, Maria arrived at the estate to find it empty. No Elena. No Henderson. Just Ghost's blood on the garage floor and shattered glass glinting in the early light. Her stomach twisted. She pulled out her phone to call the police, but then she heard it. Sirens. Distant but getting closer. Something had already happened. Maria moved through the house on instinct, checking rooms, looking for anything that might explain the blood and the broken window. In the master bedroom, the wastebasket beside Elena's vanity caught her eye. Papers. Crumpled but not completely destroyed. Maria pulled them out, smoothing them against the marble countertop. Life insurance documents. Multiple policies. Henderson Butler. Insured party. Elena Butler. Sole beneficiary. $3 million from Military Benefit Association. Another 2.5 from Western Life. Another $1 million from a private carrier Maria had never heard of. But it was the signatures that made Maria's breath catch. Henderson's signature on the beneficiary forms, supposedly signed last month. Maria had seen Henderson's handwriting 1,000 times. She'd delivered his mail, organized his correspondence, filed his disability paperwork. This wasn't his signature. The angle was wrong. The pressure too uniform. Too perfect. This was forgery. And not even a good one. Maria's hands shook as she photographed each document with her phone. There were others too. Medical power of attorney forms, dated just 2 weeks ago, giving Elena complete control over Henderson's healthcare decisions. Do not resuscitate orders that Henderson would never have signed. The man had survived a roadside bomb and refused to give up. He wouldn't surrender his life to a piece of paper. At the bottom of the stack, Maria found something that made her blood run cold. A handwritten note on Elena's personal stationery. Just 3 lines. Riverside Cemetery. East Section. Grave pre-dug. Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Below it, a phone number and a name. Randall, $5,000 cash. Elena hadn't just planned to kill her husband. She'd hired someone to dig his grave. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder, calculated down to the dollar amount paid to an accomplice. Maria grabbed the documents and ran for her car. Henderson was alive. She'd heard the sirens, heard them heading toward the hospital. But if Elena had gone this far, she wouldn't stop. Not with $9 million on the line. St. Peter's Hospital emergency room was chaos when Elena Butler walked through the sliding glass doors. She'd changed clothes. The dirt-stained jeans and torn jacket were gone, replaced by a tasteful black sweater and designer slacks. She'd washed the soil from under her fingernails, wrapped her wounded arm in gauze beneath her sleeve, and practiced her expression in the rearview mirror. Grief. Shock. The perfect mask of a devastated wife. "My husband," she said to the nurse at the intake desk, her voice trembling just right. "Henderson Butler." They told me he was brought here. Please, I need to see him." The nurse checked her computer, her face softening with sympathy. "He's in Trauma Bay 3. "But ma'am, you should know." Elena didn't wait. She pushed through the double doors into the treatment area, scanning room numbers until she found him. Henderson lay on a gurney, an oxygen mask over his face, for lines running into both arms. His skin was gray, dirt still caked in his hair despite someone's attempt to clean him. Monitors beeped steadily, measuring a life that had come within minutes of ending. And beside the bed, lying on the floor with his head resting on his paws, was Ghost. The shepherd's ears pricked up the moment Elena entered. His amber eyes locked onto her, and something changed in his posture. Every muscle tensed. His lips curled back slowly, revealing teeth still stained with her blood. "Henderson, oh my God!" Elena rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. Perfect tears. Practiced tears. "What happened? Who did this to you?" Ghost rose to his feet. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest, building in intensity. Elena froze 3 feet from the bed. The dog moved between her and Henderson, his body coiled like a spring ready to release. "Ma'am, you need to step back," a nurse said from the doorway. "The dog has been protective since they brought him in. We couldn't separate them." "I'm his wife," Elena insisted, taking another step. Ghost's growl became a snarl. His hackles rose, making him look twice his size. "That's my husband." "And that," came a voice from behind her, "is the dog that saved his life from the woman trying to bury him alive." Elena spun. 2 sheriff's deputies stood in the doorway, hands resting on their duty belts. Behind them, Detective Sarah Chen held up a clear evidence bag containing dirt-stained documents. Maria stood beside her, clutching her phone. "Elena Butler," Detective Chen said calmly, "you're under arrest for attempted murder." Elena's mask cracked. Just for a second, the grief vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. She looked at Henderson, still unconscious, then at Ghost, who hadn't stopped snarling. "I want my lawyer." "I'm sure you do." The detective nodded to the deputies. As they moved to cuff her, Elena's eyes met Ghost's one last time. The shepherd didn't blink, didn't back down. His message was clear: you're done. For months later, Lewis and Clark County Courthouse stood silent under a gray November sky. Inside courtroom 4B, every seat was filled. Veterans in dress uniforms lined the gallery, brothers and sisters who'd heard Henderson's story and come to bear witness. Maria sat in the front row, rosary beads wrapped around her fingers. Sam Reeves stood against the back wall in his ranger uniform, arms crossed. And in the defense area, elegant in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, sat Elena Butler. Her face was composed, almost bored, as if the proceedings were beneath her. Henderson wheeled himself to the witness stand, Ghost walking beside him. The judge had made an exception, allowing the service dog to remain. Henderson's lawyer had argued that Ghost wasn't just a pet. He was a living witness to the crime. The shepherd settled at Henderson's feet, his eyes never leaving Elena. "Mr. Butler," the prosecutor began gently, "can you tell the court what happened on the evening of July 16th? Henderson's hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. His voice, when it came, was steady but carried the weight of every moment he'd spent in that grave. "My wife told me she wanted to help me honor my fallen brothers. She drove me to Riverside Cemetery and pushed me to a remote section. There was a hole in the ground, freshly dug, 6 feet deep. He paused, gathering himself. She told me I'd become inconvenient, that my life was worth $9 million to her. Then she pushed me in and started burying me alive. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's fingers on keys. Elena's expression never changed. "Did you believe you were going to die?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." Henderson's voice cracked. "I couldn't move my legs. Couldn't climb out. The dirt kept coming. I could taste it, feel it filling my lungs. I thought about the brothers I'd lost overseas, and I thought this is how it ends. Not in combat, not defending my country, but in a hole dug by the woman who promised to love me." Several people in the gallery wiped their eyes. Elena examined her manicured nails. "What saved you?" Henderson reached down, his hand finding Ghost's head. "He did. He broke free from where she'd tied him, tracked us through a mile of forest, and attacked her before she could finish. Then he dug me out with his own paws until help arrived. He bled for me. Again." The trial lasted 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged insurance documents, the payment to Randall Hayes, the drifter she'd hired to dig the grave, who'd turned state's witness for immunity. Henderson's testimony. Ghost's DNA on Elena's arm matching the bite wounds. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty. Attempted murder in the first degree. Fraud. Forgery. Judge Patricia Moreno looked down at Elena without sympathy. "Mrs. Butler, you didn't just try to kill your husband. You tried to erase him, to bury a war hero like garbage for money. This court sentences you to 40 years in the Montana State Prison without possibility of parole for 25 years. Elena's composure finally broke. "This is insane. He's just a Marine who survived war only to be betrayed by you." The judge cut her off. "We're done here. Bailiff." As they led Elena away, she looked back once. Henderson sat perfectly still, Ghost at his side, watching her disappear through the door. Neither moved until she was gone. 18 months after the trial, the Butler estate looked nothing like the cold, sterile mansion Elena had maintained. The wrought iron gates now bore a wooden sign hand-carved by one of the residents. Guardian Ranch, a haven for warriors. The manicured lawns had been converted into accessible pathways winding through wildflower gardens. The garage where Ghost had broken free was now a therapy center equipped with physical rehabilitation equipment designed for wheelchair users. And the house itself, once silent and empty, now echoed with voices, laughter, and the occasional bark of dogs reunited with their handlers. Henderson sat on the front porch in the late afternoon sun, watching Ghost play with a group of German shepherds and Labrador retrievers in the meadow below. Beside him, in a smaller wheelchair, sat 12-year-old Marcus Chen, a boy born with spina bifida who'd been bouncing through the foster system until Henderson and Maria, now the ranch's full-time director, had pulled strings to bring him here for a summer program. The summer had turned into something permanent. "Think I could train a dog like Ghost?" Marcus asked, his eyes following the shepherd's graceful movements. Henderson smiled. "I think you already are. Ghost likes you better than he likes most people, and that's saying something." As if on cue, Ghost trotted up the porch steps and positioned himself between the two wheelchairs, his tail wagging. Marcus reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears, and Ghost leaned into the touch with a contented sigh. Sam Reeves emerged from the house carrying 2 mugs of coffee, settling into the rocking chair beside Henderson. The ranger had resigned from his position 6 months ago to become Guardian Ranch's head of security and outdoor programs. "Got 3 more applications today," he said. "All combat vets with service dogs. We're going to need to expand the bunkhouse." "Good," Henderson said simply. "That's what this place is for." Down the driveway, a van pulled up carrying 4 veterans from the VA hospital in Helena. They'd come for the weekend program, equine therapy, adaptive hiking, group counseling, and most importantly, time with people who understood, who'd been broken and put themselves back together in whatever shape they could manage. Henderson watched them disembark, some in wheelchairs, some on prosthetics, one with a service dog that immediately ran to greet Ghost. This was what he'd survived for. Not the money Elena had craved. Not the estate or the benefits or any of it. This. The chance to transform his grandfather's legacy and his own near death into something that healed instead of hurt. Marcus wheeled himself toward the edge of the porch. "Mr. Butler, do you ever think about her? About what she did?" Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Ghost's head lifted, sensing the shift in his mood. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look around at all this, at all of you, and I realize she took nothing from me that mattered. She couldn't bury what I really am. None of them can. Not the IED. Not the grave. Not the people who see the wheelchair before they see the Marine." He reached down, his hand finding Ghost's head. "We're still here. And we're still fighting. Just for something better now." Ghost's tail thumped against the porch boards, and Marcus smiled. The sun dipped below the mountains, casting Guardian Ranch in gold. Somewhere in the bunkhouse, someone started playing guitar. Dogs barked. People laughed. And for the first time in years, Henderson Butler felt something he'd thought was buried forever in that cemetery. Peace. This is what loyalty looks like. What redemption feels like. What happens when the worst betrayal becomes the catalyst for the greatest transformation. Henderson and Ghost didn't just survive. They created a legacy that will outlive them both, touching countless lives one broken warrior at a time. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even in our darkest moments there's hope, we need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. And every view, every share, every subscription helps us bring more of these powerful testimonies to light. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next story we tell might be the one someone desperately needs to hear. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing. And remember, you're never buried as long as someone refuses to stop digging.